Well, I am so excited to have this opportunity to talk with my friend Michael Pettersen from Shure. I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about our history together.
Yeah, thanks.
And a huge part of that, Michael, has to do with the fact that I wouldn't be sitting here as the Shure rep if you didn't have a little conversation with a consultant a number of years ago.
Yep, indeed.
It's
Yeah, Neil Shaw.
Neil Shaw, that's exactly right. And just for our audience out there, it's always such a fun story to tell. Shure had decided, well, 27 years ago that they were going to make a change. I know it's surprising. 27 years ago, they were going to make a change in the representation in Southern California. Opened up perhaps one of the best opportunities the audio industry could have, the Shure rep in Southern California. And Shure had gone through this long process of identifying some firms and putting some interviews in place, but audio gear at that point hadn't quite made the cut. Hadn't just hadn't didn't have the size of the company Shure was perhaps looking for, 10, 20 people, etc. And yet my friend Michael Pettersen, who was speaking to this consultant, spoke about this transition, and somehow or another my company name came up. And
I didn't
correctly,
know, but I didn't know you. I didn't know you at the time. What I did, yeah, I was talking to the people within Shure that were searching for the new reps, and I said, "How about this? Rather than just doing your own research, let me call some acoustical consultants in Southern California and find out which ones are receiving good service from the reps out there." And that's what. And I called up Neil, and I think I called up Kate kind of broke too, maybe. I don't remember who I talked to. I talked about 3 consultants.
Yeah.
And your name was consistent in all of those. And Neil was particularly saying, this guy really does a good job. So I came back to the folks at Shure and said, who's audio gear? You know? and then that's how they looked at you. So that's how it happened.
Well, thank you very much for that. I remember the sales manager at the time had called me and said, we've already booked all of our interviews, but we have a slot Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. if you can make it. Anyway, long story short, 27 years later, here we are. Big thank you, great opportunity, and of course, lots of wonderful interaction over the course of those years. And the interesting thing is, as it pertains to our relationship, when we first met, you were the director of applications engineering.
What year was it, Eldon? So 27 years, wasn't it? Yeah. I would have been I was doing applications, right?
That's right, 99, something like that.
Yep.
Which is impossible because I'm 33, but whatever.
Right.
But you were director of applications engineering, and of course, aside from setting us up and helping this great opportunity, which we discussed, from then I called you for the next 20 years straight with every audio question under the sun, and you were always so gracious in helping and assisting and teaching me and my team about Shure, the company, the technology, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to say thank you for that.
Welcome.
Would you mind sort of outlining your history with Shure? Like, how long have you been there? What was the first job? Where you're at now?
So I owned Shure products when I was in high school and in college. I owned a Shure microphone, my rock band. I owned Shure cartridges. I thought it was a cool company. So when I started to look for a college job after college, and I was in Illinois, Shure was one of the places I thought of. So literally September 1976, I walked into the HR department, felt personnel, unannounced, and basically said, "Hi, here's who I am. I want to know more about your company because I use their products." And they said to me, "Well, what job are you here for?" I said, "Well, I don't know if I'm here for a job. I just want to talk to you." And so they did not know what to do with me. So finally, an HR manager comes out and says, "Come back to my office. I'll talk to you. Who is this weird guy?" So I'm sitting in his office and we're talking, and I noticed behind him, he's got these microphones on the countertop. And I start naming off the model numbers. Now, the HR guy couldn't name the model numbers, but I did. So he says, "Oh, you seem to know a lot about our products." "Yeah, I do." "And your sales manager is Roger Condo, and your vice president of engineering, your vice president of sales is Ray Ward," and so forth. And he's very puzzled. He says, "Stay here." So he walks away for about 10 minutes, and he comes back and says, "Would you like to apply for a job in our sales department?" And I said, "Oh, maybe." So we talked, and the next day I came back. We had to take IQ tests back then. So I took some IQ tests, and literally a week after walking in there completely unannounced, they called me up and offered me a sales trainee position to be a regional sales manager, but I had to be trained first. So October 11th, 1976, I started at Shure as in the sales department. And literally, you could not do that today, but literally I walked in off the street and said in a certain way, you need to hire me. I didn't say that, but that's exactly what happened. So I did sales management in Southern California. Jack Berman Company was one of my reps at the time until 1981. And then by then I realized that I really was more interested in the product than in the sales of the product. So I started doing product management in 1981. I did that from 81 through about 90. Our FP products, our automatic microphone system, our M267, all our mixer products in the 80s were basically under my management. For a short period of time, I did something called advanced product planning, which is basically looking at technologies that were going to affect us in the future. And then it got to a point where I had a young guy working for me named John Tatulis, who was ready to take over as product manager. And if I had stayed there, he would have got frustrated. So I basically said, well, I better find out something else to do. And so I came up with the idea of application engineering. At the time, you could not call Shure and say, hi, I'm trying to mic an accordion. What do I do? We didn't know who to send it to. It was a sales, it was a customer service, it was a service. There was no place to answer those questions. So I thought, let's start a department called application engineering. By the way, this was before app. The term apps was used for, for phones and so forth. So it was how to apply our products. So Jim Cogan, the president at the time, said, well, I like this idea. I'll give you a year to do it. I said, no. I said, this will take 5 years to establish. If you give me 5 years to get it going, I'll let you do it. I'll agree. So, well, okay, he did. So I stepped away from product management, started application engineering in 1993, I think it was. And within 5 years, we've become a reason that people would buy Shure as opposed to other people, because you could come to us and get an honest answer. So I did applications from 1993 to around 2015, 2016. At the time, Gino Sigismondi was working for me. He was ready to take over the job. At that point, Alan, I had to either retire. If I stepped away from the job, basically, even though Gino would take over, people would say, oh, there's Michael. We'll go talk to Michael, right? Because I was doing it for 20-some years. So I didn't want Gino to be in that situation. And at the time, Mark Bruner said to me, we could use a historian here. And I, of course, had studied the history of Shure because Mrs. Shure and I had worked together on our 400-page anniversary book, right? So it was around 2016 that I became the full-time historian, now 9 years ago. And that's how it happened.
Wow, that is incredible. After all these years, I'm still learning. I knew that you were the director of applications engineering. I didn't know that you created the department and started it, because it was such a unique and remains such a unique aspect of Shure. The fact that if someone were to call Shure and say, I want to mic this, or I want to do this or that, I was always surprised that if Shure didn't make the product, you'd raise your hand and you go, we don't make anything that's ideal for that, but you should call these guys.
Yeah.
Who does that, right? Mm-hmm. It's just so representative of the company doing the right thing and approaching it more from certainly a customer-based focus, but also just a pure educational focus. This is how this works. That doesn't work that way. Go this direction.
Right.
Remarkable.
Miracle on 34th Street. Macy's doesn't have them. Go over to Gimbel's.
Right. Well put.
And Mr. Shure always used to say, if you educate the customer in a truthful manner, you'll have a customer for life. And that's absolutely true. People will go, wow, I called Shure and they sent me to Sennheiser, but man, wow, how honest of that of them. And then of course they remember Shure.
Right.
So yeah, so that was the gist of it. Wasn't any really genius. It was just like, this should work. And it did.
And it did. And still does, right? How about that?
It does.
Well, I have to say thank you, because again, for all the different positions you've held there, Director of Applications Engineering, the historian you've given me and many of my customers tours of the facility and the history, and just the value and knowledge and insight you've brought to Shure and to my company and our customers is spectacular. So thank you.
Welcome.
I think that's probably an appropriate segue into the headliner reason we're here, and that is, I think Shure has an anniversary coming
birthday,
up or something like that?
Indeed, it is our centennial year. As of April 25th, 2025, we are 100 years old. So I've created a presentation which I call 100 Years of History in 60 Minutes or Less. It basically fly through really kind of the most important things that happened in our 100-year history. I think you'll enjoy it. I think the folks that see this will enjoy it. We'll have time for questions and answers afterwards. A lot of it, as being the reps for 27 years, some of the stuff you're going to know. And typically, if I was doing this just for you, I would kind of slide over those things, but I want to slow down those extras because there may be people who don't know these things as well.
I love that.
So we'll do these 100 slides. It takes me about 45 minutes to go through them. I don't spend much time on any of them. We kind of fly through them. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. That work for you?
That works great. Did you say that there's 100 slides?
We're over 100 slides. But
I only say that because 100-year anniversary, 100 slides.
Yeah.
I'm like, that took some time.
Maybe 106. I've been adding a few recently. So
well, we're looking forward to it. So you take it away, and thank you again.
Let's see if we can share this screen. So here we go, folks. 100 years history highlights, 60 minutes or less. So since 1925, Shure products have delivered the sounds of history and the culture to the world. That's just not a tagline. It is impossible almost to see a famous photo from history where a microphone was involved where it's not a Shure product there. We were founded in 1925. We're privately held. We have over 35 locations worldwide. And Mr. and Mrs. Shure established trust back in the 1960s, basically to carry out their wills after they were gone. So currently now, 2025, an employee trust controls our company, and a charitable trust supports philanthropic organizations. So we're a for-profit company that's run for the benefit of charity. Very unusual situation. We make products for musicians, audio engineers, broadcasters, all kinds of different folks. You know that. And we also are known for making products which exceed expectations in performance and durability and reliability. Mr. Shure said, "We know very well that absolute perfection cannot be attained, but we'll never stop striving for it." So what do we make? We make wired microphones of all types. We made our first wired microphones in the early 1930s. We make wireless microphones and in-ear monitors. We make conference room equipment, wireless discussion systems, headphones and earphones, and audio and RF control software. That's kind of an overview of our portfolio. But let's look at our history, because our history is really interesting. At least it's interesting to me. So here it is, 1902, Sidney Natkin Shure. He liked to be called S.N. Shure, but that was his name. Sidney was his first name. Natkin was his mother's middle name, or last name, excuse me. And he was born March 27th in Chicago. He's the eldest of four. In the lower right-hand corner there, you can see all the family, including his parents, Mandel and Bessie, and they were born in Lithuania. So Mr. Shure, 1925, the Shure Radio Company is founded. We started out one-man operation selling radio parts. We'd get a catalog and you would buy all the parts that you would need to build AM radios. That was at the time a big hobby for people. 1928, his brother S.J. joined the firm for a short period of time. And at that time, we renamed ourselves from Shure Radio Company to Shure Brothers Company. In 1929, microphones came into the picture. We became the sole distributor of some microphones made here in the Chicago area, a company called Ellis Electrical Laboratories. So the very first microphones ever sold by Mr. Shure were not made by Shure, they were made by Ellis, and Mr. Shure and his company were the distributors. Here's our 1930s catalog, the cover of it. We're selling radio kits, we're selling assembled radios, we're selling household goods, we're selling microphones, we're selling everything we can try to do to stay in business because it's the beginning of the Depression. During that year, S.J. Shure left their company and formed a company called Shure Manufacturing in St. Louis that fabricates sheet metal products. That company is still in business. When you're done with this thing, with this history lesson, go to Google, put in Shure Manufacturing St. Louis, and you'll learn about the company formed by the other Shure brothers. The first Shure microphones that were branded as Shure, the first mics that were branded as Shure were condenser models. These are designed for recording studios and radio broadcast studios. Here are some photos of those. They were expensive. This is in the middle here, that's the power supply, and here's two examples of the condenser mics. In today's dollars, probably $2,000, $3,000, I would say. First ad for a Shure microphone was January 1932, and look, it's for one of our condenser microphones, and it's for recording studios primarily. Again, expensive stuff, well over $1,000 for one of these mics. Also in 1932, we started to develop and design and manufacture our first carbon microphones. The Ellis mics that I mentioned before are carbon microphones. These are our own version of carbon microphones. So again, they came out in 1932. 1933, the first US president to use a Shure microphone is FDR. Here he is speaking into a Model 11N carbon microphone. Shure microphones have been used by every president of the United States since FDR through the current administration. And because of that association, we are always proud to say that more lies have been heard through the Shure branded microphones than any other microphones in the world. Our first wireless product came out in 1933. Here's the Model 99 radio modulator. It's that brown box on the right. What did it do? PA systems in the early 30s were very expensive. What if you needed a small PA system to talk to 30 people or 50 people, something like that? Well, what you do is you would take your AM radio set, which almost everybody had sitting on a table somewhere. You take your Shure carbon microphone, plug it into the AM radio, into the Model 99 radio modulator, and it would turn the microphone signal into an AM radio signal and broadcast it through your table set. So you would turn your AM radio into a PA system, small PA system. So that was our first wireless product. Our first crystal microphone came out in 1935. If you don't know about crystal microphones, they're really pretty cool, and they sound pretty cool too. Inside of a crystal microphone is a small sliver of Rochelle salt. Rochelle salt was developed in the 1700s as a laxative. I don't know who discovered it. It could also be a microphone. But imagine a small sliver of salt about the size of your fingernail, and one end is held down and the other end is slightly bounced by the diaphragm, and it produces an electrical signal. And that's what a crystal microphone is. They sounded really pretty good. Their weakness was salt dissolves when it gets rained on or when it gets too humid. So that was the problem with crystal microphones. It didn't work well in high humid environments. One of our first logos came out in 1936. This is our circle logo. We still use this on our packaging and our literature today. If you look on the left-hand side, these are audio waves, or sound waves, if you will. Here's the Shure S, or a sine wave in the middle, and here's the voice coil in the microphone. So if you go from left to right, it is a microphone. And if you go from right to left, it is an earphone. Again, this logo is still used today. 1936, we hire a genius. His name is Benjamin Bauer. He came from the University of Cincinnati, and he worked for Shure for 20 years, and then he worked for CBS Labs for 20 years. And over that time period, he had over 100 patents to his name. He was born in the Ukraine. His name originally was Baumsweiger, lived in Poland, England, and Cuba before coming to the United States. And he was learning English and going to college at the same time. That's how smart this guy was. So he attended the Pratt Institute, University of Chicago, University of Cincinnati, and ended up here at Shure in Chicago. And thank God, because if he hadn't, we would not be in business today. Here's our headquarters in 1937, 225 West Huron Street in Chicago. We are on floors 3 and 4. And that was our home until 1956. This building still exists. Now it's high-end condos. We started doing phonograph pickups and tone arms in 1937. We were in that business for 81 years. We exited the phonograph product market around 2018. We began selling our products internationally in 1937. Our first customers outside the United States were in Canada and in Israel, which was then called Palestine. Gideon Electronics became our agent in the Palestine, and 85 years later, even 85 plus years later, Gideon is still our sales rep or our distribution center in Israel. Here is a page that changed the world. This is from Ben Bauer's lab notebook from 1937. This is the page where he first wrote down the uniphase acoustical network. Uniphase acoustical network, it basically allows a single element microphone to be a cardioid pattern. And these lab notebooks are sitting right now. They're about 5 feet away from me, locked in the cabinet in my office. And when we found the actual lab notebooks have been lost for about 60 years. We found them around 2016. And I was documenting them all, and I'm going through there, and I got to this page, and I saw that diagram there, and I stopped cold. I said, this was the day he invented the uniphase. It's really pretty cool to see this. For me, it was like looking at Einstein's papers. Here's our leadership team in 1938. Here's Ben Bauer, who I just mentioned. Maurice Cope, he was head of manufacturing. There's Jack Berman, Alan. Take a look at Jack Berman right there. And there is Mr. Shure on the right-hand side. And here is a meeting of reps and employees in Chicago. There's a few people I want to point out here. Again, there's Jack Berman. There's his brother, Gene. They were our sales department at the time. Here's Mr. Shure, our founder. This is Ralph Glover, our first sales engineer, our first chief engineer, I should say. Here's his S.K. McDonald. S.K. McDonald is still our rep in Maryland. This is actually him himself. Here's Ben Bauer here with a little curl on his forehead. And this is Wes Scher. Wes Scher is the guy that designed the outside of the Unidyne microphone. So Ben Bauer did the inside, and Wes Scher did the outside. Here's the prototype for our Unidyne microphone from 1938. This is a model that's made out of wood and silver paint. We didn't know that it existed. When we were moving from Evanston to Niles, someone crawled underneath the anechoic chamber in Evanston and brought out a dusty old box. And on the side of the box, it said Ben's Mic 1938, and this prototype was inside of it. Truly amazing. Here it is, the microphone that changed the world for us, the Unidyne 1 Model 55, the world's first single element moving coil mic with a cardioid pattern. As I mentioned, the industrial design was by Wes Scher, but he was inspired by the front end of that car. That's an Oldsmobile Coupe 6, 1937. Mr. Shure drove Oldsmobile cars. We don't know if he had this very model, but it could have been the inspiration. So again, there's the mic, there's the Oldsmobile. Our first ribbon mic came out in 1939. That's the Model 50. We didn't call it a ribbon. We called it a moving conductor. Not certain why, but we decided not to call it a ribbon. I just love the streamlining aspect of it and the little fins back here. Just a beautiful looking mic. So by 1940, 10 years after that catalog I showed you before, we're now no longer a distributor, we're a manufacturer of microphones and acoustic devices. And in 1941, Ben Baumsweiger, as he was born, the most important patent in our history is awarded to Ben. It is the Uniphase Acoustical Network. And here is that same diagram that I showed you before that was hand-drawn in his lab notebook. So, December 1941, Japan bombs the United States. We get pulled into World War II. And then the next year, from 1942 January to 1942 December, our company grows from 100 people to 1,000 employees in 1 year because we're working 6 days a week, 2 shifts a day to build microphones and headphones for the Allied forces. Here you see a pilot. He's got a Shure throat microphone around his neck, and he's got Shure headphones over his head. The other important thing was that we started building things to military specifications. And these quality standards that were adopted in World War II are still kept today. That's why our products are so durable. Here's examples of military products we supplied to the Allies. T-17, very common microphone used in tanks and all types of moving vehicles. Battle announced microphone would have been used on a shipboard, mask microphone, oxygen mask for bomber pilots, standard radio microphone for all types of radios, headphones, throat microphones for pilots. We also made small tests. This is called a piston phone. This was the device you could take out in the field and you could recalibrate microphones with them. So we made a whole variety of those products. We have examples of all of these in the archive, except for the piston phone. And even though they're 80 plus years old, they still operate. Here's an example of a Shure product at a point in history. This is on the USS Missouri, September 1945, when Japan signs the peace treaty with the Allied forces. Here's General MacArthur, and if you look closely there, you will see a Unidyne 1 in front of Mr. MacArthur, General MacArthur, documenting the audio from that ceremony. Circa 1946, our products were being used not only in the United States, but around the world. This is an Indian statesman, Mr. Raja Gopalachari, and he is using a Shure Unidyne 1 in India to address the crowd. But you might notice it says Chicago here. Well, what's all that about? In the 30s and 40s, Chicago was the Silicon Valley of the audio industry. Chicago meant hip new technologies. So a audio video rental company in India decided to call itself Chicago Radio. So this is the actual sign that they put up at all their rentals. That just said Chicago, and did that. It accidentally referred to where the microphone came from, but it actually meant Chicago Radio out of India. The company still exists today. It's no longer called Chicago Radio, but it's a huge company in India. By 1947, we had stopped making most military products and gone back to consumer products, but we had kept those military specs that I mentioned. Here's a cover from our 1947 catalog. You can just kind of look, they're called lifestyle images today. So microphones for transportation, for stage, for movie production, for radio, and so forth. Gives you an idea of where our mics were being used. At the founding of Israel, May 1948, there are two Model 701D microphones there, again, capturing the sounds of history for the world. These are the 701D crystal microphones from around 1937. I just recently found out that those Hebrew letters there mean sound, S-O-N-D. So maybe this was a radio mic for radio broadcasting and this was for PA. I don't really know. Also from 1948, the famous situation where Chicago Daily Tribune said that Dewey defeats Truman, but of course he didn't. Truman won. And here he is lifting it up and talking to the crowd, and there you see at his elbow a Unidyne 1 capturing this moment in history. 1951, the big Unidyne 1 had been out since 1939. It is considered too large for television. Television comes to Shure and said, please make a smaller version of the Unidyne 1, and we did. We made the Unidyne 2, 55S, that stands for small. And the Unidyne 2 is still being manufactured today, 70 years after it being introduced. Take that, Apple. 1952, we bring out an ad, which I love, photograph of more celebrities the world over than any other microphone. A microphone that needs no name. Look closely at that ad, and you'll see the name Shure is not in it. It's because it was so well known that people just knew, oh, that's a microphone. It just happened to be a Shure microphone. By the way, the appearance of the Unidyne 2 is a registered trademark of our company worldwide. So if you ever see it being used without our permission, we would like to know about it, particularly our legal department. Companies that we have shut down, the biggest was probably IKEA. IKEA was selling pillowcases with images of the Unidyne 2 on it without our permission. And according to our legal department, they ignored the first 20 letters they got from us. They did not ignore the 21st. And they stopped selling those pillowcases. By the way, I have an example of the pillowcase in the archive, though. Had to do that. But please know, worldwide trademark, let us know if you see it being used without our authorization. Our first wireless microphone system came out in 1953, the Vagabond 88. I love that name, Vagabond, wander anywhere with it. It was about $8,000 in today's money, approximately. The transmitter, it was the world's first transmitter where the microphone element and the transmitter was in the same body. It had 5 miniature vacuum tubes inside of it, operated off of a 30-volt battery, and promised a transmission of about 35 feet. So you're paying basically $8,000 to get rid of a 35-foot cable. The first purchaser was the Archdiocese of Chicago for Holy Name Cathedral here, and one of the second purchasers was I think it was the Flamingo in Las Vegas. Las Vegas was one of the first places that were using our wireless microphones way back in 1953. So a bit of serendipity. Rock and roll became popular in the 1950s. Singers no longer wanted to stand at one spot on the stage and not touch the microphone. They wanted to take the microphone and move it around as Elvis did. And it just turned out that our Unidyne 1 and our Unidyne 2 microphones were perfect for it because they were really good at rejecting acoustical feedback. And that's how we got into the rock and roll business. 1956, we moved it from downtown Chicago into our first headquarters. This is in Evanston, Illinois, which is where I live today. And this is about 5 miles from where I'm sitting right now. And this building was constructed specifically for Shure. The building still exists. Now it's owned by a car dealership, but that's where I first walked in. It's the Shure and that door. I said, hi, you guys need to hire me. In 1958, we bring out the Model 3. This is the world's first stereo moving magnet cartridge. Stereo LP had just been introduced by CBS, and now we had a way to play it. For many years, I thought that was more serendipity, but it turned out that we had a secret agreement that started in 1954 with CBS, And as CBS was developing the stereo LP, we were developing a way to play it. So they both were announced in February 1958. That was a huge, huge hit for us. Imagine. In 1959, we bring out our Unidyne 3. So Unidyne 1 was the grandfather, Unidyne 2 was the father, and now here are the grandkids. The Unidyne 3 came out in 1945. Because magnets could be smaller and stronger, we could actually make the microphone smaller, and it became an end fire microphone, a microphone that you would sing into the end of it rather into the side of it. We opened our first facility outside the United States in 1961. It's in Shure Electronics Limited in London. Shure UK now is basically a descendant of that office from 1961. Another moment in time, Martin Luther King, 1963 in Washington, he delivers a "I Have a Dream" speech. There are two Shure microphones in there. There is a Shure Unidyne 2. When you hear Dr. King's speech played back today, it's almost certainly recorded by this Unidyne 2. But there's also a Commando, a Shure Commando here, model 415. I'm not sure what that was feeding, but there are two Shure microphones capturing that moment of history. Our first SM stands for studio microphone, by the way, because we thought the SM series was going to go into radio and TV studios. How wrong we were. Was the SM56, and why people say, well, why did you choose 56? Well, guys and ladies, we already used the number 55, so we just chose the next number, which is 56, SM56. Here's the Beatles performing in Chicago at Comiskey Park, for a baseball stadium that no longer exists. Here's the biggest band in the world, and they've got their windscreen being held on by a rubber band. Quick story on this. We had loaned the Beatles 12 Model 545s for this tour. The deal was when the tour was over, they would send the microphones back to Shure, and Shure would auction them off for charity. The tour ends, 30 days pass, no mics, 60 days pass, no mics, 90 days pass, no mics. Finally, our PA, or Public Relations Department, contacts Shure management, or Beatles management, and says, where are the microphones that you promised? And Beatles management said, oh, we shipped them back to your service department the week after the tour ended. Did you put any paperwork in there to tell you that they were from the Beatles? No, we just shipped them back. So we go back and check our service department records. Certainly enough, a box of 12 microphones came in. There was nothing to do with it. There was nothing to tell them what to do. And so the service department scrapped all the microphones that had been used by the Beatles. Too bad. 1965, we introduced the SM57. Why 57? Well, there was already an SM56 and there was already a Model 55, so it was just the next number that came about. And of course, those microphones have been used by the White House Communications Agency since 1965 for the President of the United States. Sometimes there's been 3, sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 1, but it's always the SM57. SM58 came out in 1966. I don't need to tell you why it was called 58, because that was the next number that was available. And it became the most popular vocal microphone in the world. Didn't happen automatically, by the way. It took about 10 years to get established. As a matter of fact, in the first year of SM58 sales, we only sold 145 units for the entire year. It was not an immediate success. It took almost a decade to establish itself. We also, in the 60s, brought out our first broadcasting portable mixer called the M67. This could operate off of batteries or AC, and it was used at baseball games and basketball games and news events. And it was a small portable mixer you could take out to the field, and then the output of this would drive a telephone line, which would take the audio signal back to the main station, be it television or radio. Woodstock happened in 1969, August. All the microphones on stage were Unidyne 3 Model 565s. There were about 20 or 25, according to Bill Hanley, who mixed that. Bill is still alive. I've talked to Bill about Woodstock many times. He said he had used the Model 565 at other events. He liked them. He had a bunch of them in rental, so he brought them all to the Woodstock. And he made them all the same mic because the people on stage were volunteers and they couldn't tell one microphone from another. So rather than saying, put a 545 here or a 565 here, Bill just said, put a microphone on that instrument, put a microphone on that person. And they were all the same mics. Just made it very simple for the quick sit-ups and teardowns. And because of that, arena rock became a thing, and our microphones were well established for that. So here's Hendrix performing at Woodstock, and here's Ravi Shankar performing at Woodstock with 4 565 microphones in that photo. What you may not know is that all the recordings you hear from Woodstock were done through M67 mixers. So they were not only were Shure microphones out front, M67 mixers were in the background recording all of the sounds that came off the Woodstock stage. The Rolling Stones first did a contract with Shure to endorse our microphones in 1972, but they had been using our microphones since 1963. Earliest photos we have of the Stones using a Unidyne 3 is from '63, and here over 6 decades later, they are still loyal users of our microphones. You know, hard to imagine the biggest band in the world, and they still today in 2025 say microphones got to be Unidyne 3s. We introduced the SM7 in 1973. It was aimed as a moving coil microphone for TV and radio announcers. I will tell you that for the first 35 years, this product was just an average seller. And then once podcasters got a hold of it, the streamers got a hold of it, and online gamers get a hold of it starting around 2008, it just really took off. So here it is now, 52 years later, and we sell more SM7s today than we ever did in the past. It's just a really strange story of a product that's nearly 35 years to establish itself. The photo there is Bruce Springsteen and Barack Obama, and they're talking to the SM7s. I think this is a Bruce Springsteen podcast. I'm not certain about that. I joined Shure here October 11th of 1976. Alan, you've never seen this photo. This is me. This is my first photo ID taken at Shure. I was very young when I started here. 1978, we bring out the SM81. Shure has always been known to making durable products, and as touring sound grew, touring sound engineers saying, man, we really want condenser microphones to take on the road, but we can't because they're too fragile. Sure, can you make a condenser microphone that is as rugged and can go through the same tests and drop tests as the SM58? And it took us about 3 years to do that. But the SM81 was it. It was a condenser microphone that was rugged enough to be used on the road. And of course, they're still sold today. 1981, Mr. Shure steps back as the CEO of the company. He's still the owner, of course. And Jim Cogan, Vice President of Engineering, became our first president and CEO after Mr. Shure. We opened our first manufacturing facility outside the United States in Juarez, Mexico in 1984. We have now 2 plants in Juarez. You need to know all the people that work there are Shure employees, and the plants are owned by Shure as well. So these are not contract manufacturers. These are Shure employees. We did our first teleconferencing product in 1984. Here's the Shure ST3000 speakerphone, we would call it today. This is the device that actually goes on the table, and here's the control module here. It worked only with analog television, telephone lines, landlines, if you will. But you've probably seen Polycom speakerphones, and you notice these here, that this looks just like a Polycom, because Polycom stole their design from our ST3000. Thank you, Polycom. We appreciate that. Our first product to run digital code on a microprocessor was our AMS 880. I was the product manager for this. What the AMS 880 did was it noted which microphones were going on and off on our voice-activated AMS system, automatic microphone system. As the microphones went on and off, a logic control changed. AMS would note that, and this would tell a video switcher what cameras to turn on based upon which microphones are on. So I know today, 2025, oh man, cameras following all your microphones. What a really concept. About 40 years old, folks, just so you know. 1989, another moment in time. Ronald Reagan says, tear down this wall. That's his speech in Berlin. Notice there are 3 SM57s on the podium capturing this moment in history. We got out of the wireless microphone business, the vagabond, around 1960. We got back into it in the late 80s, and in 1990, we introduced the L series VHF wireless microphone system. This was 30 years after we got out of it. But this really helped establish Shure getting back into this. Quick story on this. In the 70s and 80s, we were selling a lot of our microphone heads to manufacturers of wireless microphone systems. Good business for us. And then one day, someone here woke up and said, you know, for every one of those wireless microphone heads that we're selling, we're not selling a wired microphone, or we're not selling a wireless microphone business. Why don't we get into the business ourselves? And that's when we decided to get back into it. The people who were buying these heads were very unhappy when we decided to stop selling the heads to them. But hey, business is business, right? Our first product that used digital signal processing for the audio was our Consensus desktop teleconferencing unit. That's from 1992. So our DSP work goes back over 30 years. We got, our conferencing system. Conferencing is a big business right now. We got into our conferencing room microphones in 1993 with our Microflex line. 1995, Mr. Shure passes away at age 93. So what's going to go happen? Well, it turns out that it had already been set up that his wife, then of 41 years, Mrs. Shure, became the sole owner and chairman of the board. She had joined Shure in 1949 as an administrative aide, by the way. And she led our company until her passing in January 2016. I don't have a lot of time for Mrs. Shure stories, but I'll tell you one that tells you a lot about Mrs. Shure. So Mr. Shure passes away in 1995. And in 1996, Sidney Harmon, who started Harmon International and was a friend of the Shures, decided that he wanted to buy Shure Company to become part of Harmon International. And so he went to Mrs. Shure. Mrs. Shure said no. Well, Sidney Harmon did not give up to her easily. And every year, for at least, every year he would come to Chicago, wine and dine Mrs. Shure, and then try to buy the company. So this went on for over 10 years. And one day I saw Mrs. Shure here in Niles in the elevator, and we were just chatting. And she said, "Oh, I saw Sidney Harmon last week." And I said, "Did he try to buy the company?" And Mrs. Shure said, "Yes." He said, "It was a long dinner, and Sidney had a little too much to drink. And at the end of the dinner, he leans over to me and said, 'Rose, tonight I'm going to offer you a silly amount of money for your company.'" And I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Sidney, I already have a silly amount of money." And that was the last time that he asked. That's Mrs. Shure for you. 1996, Sandy Lamantia took over. Jim Cogan retired, and Mrs. Shure named him the president and CEO. Sandy had been the vice president of engineering before this. So from 1925 to 2016, we only had 3 presidents: Mr. Shure, Jim Cogan, and then Sandy Lamantia. We introduced our first frequency adjustable UHF series in 1996. It was really imaginatively called the UHF series. Sometimes we just get stuck for names. Wireless workbench, can you believe this? 1997, just about a year or two before we hired Audio Gear came out. So audio, at that time, wireless workbench was used to control our UHF system, which you had to go through another piece of hardware called the UA888. But wireless workbench now is coming up on 30 years it's been around. 1997, we introduced our first in-ear monitor system, the PSM 600. PSM stands for Personal Stereo Monitor, if you don't know. And included with that was E1 earphones, which are going to come back in a little bit to tell you about that. We opened our first facility in Asia, in Hong Kong, in 1999. And also in 1999, we got back into the studio condenser microphone market. Remember, we started it in the 1930s, but we'd gotten out of it. But now we came out with our KSM 32. So 67 years after our first studio microphones, we decided to get back into that with the KSM series. We won our first, or I should say our only Grammy in 2003, a technical Grammy, basically given to us for outstanding contributions of technical significance to the recording industry. In 48 years, after 48 years in Evanston, we moved to our corporate headquarters in Evanston, Illinois. I'm sitting right there is where I am. If you look in there, no, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3. I'm here, I'm not right there. But this is our headquarters now in Niles, Illinois. In 2004, we formed a consumer audio division. So remember those E1 earphones? We were making earphones in the early 2000s for musicians. And then something called an iPod came out, and people were unhappy with the iPod earphones, and they started buying Shure earphones because these are the things that musicians used. So all of a sudden, we found ourselves up in the business of consumer earphones without meaning to be. It was the customers found us, not the other way around. We opened our first manufacturing facility in Asia, in Suzhou, China. We are still there. The Suzhou plant is much larger there, but again, Shure owned, Shure Associates. KSM9 came out in 2006. I can't believe it's almost 20 years old now. This is again a weird case of bringing studio performance and condenser microphones to the field. Of course, this has selectable polar patterns as well. You can make it a cardioid or a supercardioid. Our UR systems came out in 2006. This really changed things for us because our wonderful competitor, and they are a great company, Sennheiser, really dominated touring sound until this came out. And after this came out, U2, Springsteen, Rolling Stones, other large groups started changing from Sennheiser to Shure. And it was because of the UR system. By the way, UR, we had the UHF system, right? And we would call a new thing the replacement. So we started just calling it UR inside for UHF replacement. And then we couldn't think of a better name, so we just stuck with it. That's where it came from. The Apple iPhones came out in 2007, so we started adapting our earphones so they would work with iPhones. We got back into the ribbon microphone business in 2009 when we acquired a company called Crowley and Tripp. Our first ribbon microphones date from 1939, 70 years before. And now we got back into that business again in 2009. Our PSM 1000 personal audio system tour for touring sound hit the market in 2011. Of course, that's done really well for us over the years. Our first earbuds with 4 micro drivers, the SE846, came out in 2013. And in 2014, we won an award that I'm very proud of. This is called the IEEE Milestone Award. Now, we have a Grammy Award, but there are tens of thousands of those, maybe hundreds of thousands of those. We have an Emmy Award, which I'll tell you about later. But there's only 250 of these in the entire world. And these are given out by IEEE, the Institute of Electronic and Electrical Engineers. And they're giving out to people and products that change the world. So in 2014, January 2014, we won it for the Unidyne microphone from 1939. And just to give you an idea, from the 1930s, other milestone awards are for the development of stereo sound, for the first computer, and for the breaking of the Enigma code. So to have this as an award is really something. If you come to Niles sometime, we'll show it to you. But this is the award I'm the most proud of our entire history. 2015, we opened our first facility in South America, in Sao Paulo, Brazil. That office still exists. Now with people wanting recording on their phones, we had to come up with devices that do that. So we brought out our Motive line of products to work with Apple iOS, Mac, and other PC devices. 2016, Sandy Lamantia, our third president, retired, and Chris Vink, our fourth president, came in 2016. Chris, like me, has spent her entire career here. She was hired in 1989 from the University of Wisconsin, graduate, and she was a quality assurance engineer when she started here, now our president. Our Microflex Advanced Ceiling Array and Table Mic Array came out in 2016. This is really an amazing device. I can't even believe that we can do this. But what's really cool about this is that in Ben Bauer's lab notebook from 1938, he did all the math and all the drawings and all the color patterns of how to do a table array or how to do an array microphone. It just wasn't available. The technology couldn't do it back then. So it took us about 70 years, but eventually we got around to that page in this notebook. We introduced the KSM dual diaphragm microphone. That was really the first advancement in movie coil microphones in really over 50 years. And one of the first KSM customers was the Vatican. You'll see that in just a few more slides. Our Axient Digital came out in 2017 and it really changed the world as far as RF and audio performance. And because of that, well, I'm a little jumping ahead of myself, we expanded our premium listening line with the KSC electronic electrostatic earphones in 2018. We opened our first facility in Hyderabad, India. They primarily do software engineering for us and system verification of our software and firmware. Again, Shure associates and a Shure facility. The MV88 came out, an MS stereo microphone or mid-side microphone to work with smartphones in 2019. Filmplex subminiature lapel and set microphones for theater and broadcast are also from 2019. The Motive MV7 came out just before COVID hit. My God, it was that great timing. We could have not predicted that everybody wanted to have a little podcasting studio in their house, but this was at the right time at the right place. And with COVID happening, this thing we could barely keep in stock. Our SLX-D came out in 2021. That replaced the SLX analog system from 2004. KSM-11, high-end premium quality condenser microphones for wireless in 2022. And then in 2022, we won an Emmy Award. Pretty much unbeknownst to us, Axient Digital had been used for television production. And the technical Emmy committee came to us and said, you guys maybe don't know this, but this has really changed the way that we do television production, and we would like to nominate you for an Emmy. And we said, okay, and we won. And so we have that. I actually had this in my office here for about 3 weeks while we were building a little display case for it. 2023, we bring out the SM7DB, which basically is an SM7 with a preamp built inside of it. And prove reversal is the photos from 2023. Here's Dua Lipa. She's entertaining her audience with our wireless system. And here's Pope Francis addressing our microphone to us. So you talk about from the sacred to the profane, I think we could probably say. And here's Celine at the opening of the Paris Olympic Games. One of the things we like to say is that when there's no second take, when you can't stop and do it again, you're always going to see Shure products there. And boy, this is the case where the entire world was watching. And guess what she's got? She's got a Shure wireless system with a wireless head on. We introduced our Axion digital personal stereo monitor system in 2024. Our Nexadyne line of moving coil microphones was in January of this year. And as mentioned before, we celebrated our birthday on April 25th. And here's Pope Leo XIV, born in Chicago, just like Mr. Shure. And then what's he using? A KSM-8 microphone. You can take the boy out of Chicago, but you can't take the Pope out of whatever. You know what I mean? You can't take the Chicago out of the Pope. And then just recently, we introduced our ANX4 wideband digital wireless system where you can do 16 transmitters or 24 ULXD transmitters in a single rack space. When Alan was hired, if you said, yeah, we're going to be able to do 24 receivers in one rack space, I said, you're out of your mind. Yet, here we are.
Here we are.
So, some taglines from our past. I won't go through all these, but I'll show you the ones I really like. 1934, we were known as Microphone Headquarters. I love that. 1953, we were the mark of quality. But the one I've always liked the best, and I wish we would go back for 1983, Sound of the Professionals Worldwide. I just think that says everything about the company.
I agree 100%. That's the one.
Yep. It's your sound. sound of the Professionals Worldwide is dynamite. So where are we at now? I'm about ready to wrap this up, guys. In business since 1925, 35 locations around the world, sold in 120 companies. I'd like to kind of read this to you here because it's important, and I'm going to have to move this. There we go. This is Mrs. Shure. This is from Mr. Shure's from his will. In the grantors, Mr. Shure's view, Shure Brothers is more than a business for earning a living or making money. It is an organization dedicated to performing services of the highest possible quality to its customers, as well as its employees, shareholders, suppliers, the government, the community, to all others with whom it has relations. The interests of all must be carefully considered and balanced. The operation of Shure Brothers has demonstrated that it's practical to maintain high ethical principles and yet achieve financial success. And that, my friends, is why I've never left this company. So let's review. Privately held, trust controls our company, and a charitable trust supports philanthropic organizations. Again, a for-profit company that's run for the benefit of charity. And in the 21st century, our products will continue to deliver the sounds of history and culture to the world. Now, you need to know this. Listening to me for 60 minutes or less is considered cruel and unusual punishment in 38 states. So I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I will be happy to take all of your questions. If you want to email me a question later, petterm@shure.com. Let me stop sharing. And now I am back here, and we'll leave it open to answering all the questions that I can. Thank you for your time. Alan, got a question?
Wow. All I can say is wow. The fact of when somebody sets up a deck and says, yeah, we've got 100 slides, you go, oh boy, this is going to be a big one. When it's intriguing and informative and fascinating as what you just presented, they go right on by. So thank you for all the efforts in putting that together. That was just extraordinary. There's some other gear tech, audio gear folks on the call. I don't know if they have particular questions.
Michael, do you have a specific period in Shure's history that most impacts or excites you the most? I know that a lot of us tune into your emails that you send out.
Yep.
A lot of them kind of hit differently with me. I'm curious for you from a personal standpoint. What's your favorite kind of era or topic or subject?
The 30s with Ben Bauer. His lab notebooks are extraordinary. And I had the opportunity when they had been lost. Think back, they got packed away in 1955, and they were off-site storage until 2015, and nobody knew where they were. And we discovered them one day. Julie, the historian, the archivist, and we discovered them. I took them back here. I said, "We're not going to lose these again." But I got the index of them. I read every single page and did an index. This guy had a brilliant idea every day. It's just, I can't even begin to tell you what a brilliant mind this was. And just to be able to read through these things and go, oh, and now he's here. And like when I ran across the thing and said, here's how to do a beamforming array microphone, 1938, right? And it's basically, when I showed it to the engineers here, they go, oh yeah, that's all the math. You know, so yeah, the 1930s and the Bauer Lab notebooks are to me great. I could basically do probably another 1,000 tech tips just talking about what he invented, what he conceived. I never met him, and I got to know his kids. They were in their 70s and 80s when I got to know them. I said, what was it like having a genius as a dad? I said, Dad lived to work. He would go to work, he would come home, he'd have dinner with us, we'd see him for an hour, he would go and sleep. He was a 4-hour-a-night guy, and then he would get up at 2 o'clock and write down ideas.
Great.
Hey, Michael, I've got a question about the Vagabond series. Just curious, what portion of the spectrum did that operate in, and what was the tuning with, and how many channels?
Channels, one. one channel. It was at 1.2 megahertz. And basically you had, it was vacuum tubes, right? So the frequency wasn't particularly stable. So you had like a little tuning knob on the frequency on the receiver and a little tuning on the transmitter itself. You can just imagine going, kind of tuning in like that. But interestingly enough, because it was so low power, the 30-volt battery gave you like 30 hours of operation. Amazing.
Pretty crazy what we can fit in with like ADPSM now.
Oh
right?
yeah, exactly. But yeah, number of channels, one. So because it was so low power, you could probably operate 2 in 2 adjacent buildings, but you could not operate 2 in the same venue, in the same hall, if you will. So we sold most of those to Vegas. Vegas bought some because it's Vegas always got money. We sold them in some churches that had a lot of money, and we sold them for some television production, but it was never a big seller for us. And you can imagine vacuum tubes inside there. It wasn't a particularly reliable product. And so in 1960, Mr. Shure, when we shut it down, we stopped selling them, Mr. Shure said, we'll get back into this business when we can make a wireless microphone that's as reliable as a wired microphone. And that took 30 years.
I know that when you do a factory tour, you get to go through the archives, and there's some neat stories about famous rock stars' mics that have come back to the factory and now live there. Have there been any notable contributions over the last maybe 10 or 15 years? We just got the microphones that Spinal Tap used at NAMM 2000. Yeah, you guys had to be there, right? To see your backyard. And they had been put into they were in an office here. It was like a vice president of facilities. I have no idea why she had them. And she retired, and we're cleaning out her office, and I see a microphone, Derek's mic. I go, my God, this is Spinal Tap mics. So yes, so we have the Spinal Tap microphones from that concert now. That was one fairly recent. Got some LL Cool J stuff. We've had the Roger Daltrey microphone for a long time.
And didn't Roger Daltrey like gift that to you? Like he was coming through town and he took this mic so famous with all the white gaff tape and presented it to Shure in some sort of wonderful fashion?
It was similar to that, but what happened was that it was the only mic he had, only 58 he had that failed on stage. And he sent it back to us because he was curious. He's never had one. What was different about this one? Why did it fail? So he sent it back to us, and of course we took that very seriously. And we put it in our X-ray machine, and we saw that the cable was broken where it came out of the XLR connector. The microphone worked just fine. So we sent him the X-ray. We showed him, no, it wasn't the mic that failed, it was the cable. And then he offered it to us. He said, in that wonderful accent, would you like to have this for your archive? And we and we were like, yeah. And so at the time, since I had his attention, it was a very short conversation. I just asked, so what's all this about? He's famous for spinning the mic on stage, right? And he said, that started really early. I don't do the accent anymore. It started really early. So we're on stage, and Townsend would pay about 10-minute solo. And I would stand there like an idiot. I wasn't going to go off stage. And so I started thinking, I said, lifeguards swing their whistles. So I'm going to start swinging my microphone. And then apparently he says, and after a while, he says, and Pete would take longer and longer solos, and I would get bored, and so I'd let the microphone out, and eventually I'd flick the cigarette out of his mouth, and he would know he was playing too long. So, they're like an old married couple.
And isn't that funny? The thought about the microphone failing, which we all went, that's suspect. And yet now we think about it, it had all the tape around the microphone, around the cable. He's swinging this thing around. Of course it was the cable that failed.
Of course
right?
it was the cable, right? Exactly. So he felt very good about that. That was I'm glad it was the cable.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. Yeah, so that's the most recent thing. We got a James Taylor microphone that was from on tour. That came back recently. That was a KSM. What was that? KSM 9, I think it was. I have to check.
Mm-hmm.
But the most recent one was the Spinal Tap mic, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I will tell you as a sort of testament to the company, which I don't know if we're belaboring the point at this point, but all the artists that I've been involved with because of my affiliation with Shure for so long is also sort of a testament to the company and the mutual respect of these artists and what they do. From Roger Daltrey, I remember stories of Alice Cooper. I remember Eddie Kramer and all the things that he's done and how gracious and accommodating he's been to me, to the company with all of his rich history. It just sort of drips with all this nostalgia and respect, which I just love,
The other thing is that, because we'll have, when I do tours here, sometimes we'll get artists. Most of the time it's just the crew, but every now and then the artists will come in and they're really, in awe of being someplace where they get to see where the products that they use to bring their voice across come from.
right?
And so, we're always very respectful, but we never, oh, look who's here. We try to treat it one-on-one, human to human, and that makes an impact.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Michael, just can't say enough for your being with us today and bringing all these great stories and the history. We're lucky to be associated with such an incredible company. Of course, we all know that. I think we all live it and breathe it every day. But we're also extra lucky to have you with your history, with your knowledge, technical, and your position as the historian doing all this incredible work to be able to present it in such a fashion. So just a big thanks from all of us to you and to the company. Just really appreciate you.
You're welcome. I enjoy doing it, as you can tell. And if you think of a question afterwards, send me an email. I promise. I reply to all emails. Ellen knows that.
Yes, I know. We share a few of them at 5 a.m., right?
That's true. I know.
The next one we do, I will say, will have to be a deeper dive into Michael Pettersen, the guitar player, the Chicago Jazz Orchestra, our buddy Freddie Green, right? There's a whole nother chapter here, right?
So let me do you a quick pitch, and I'll say this. So
Please.
August 18th, coming up pretty soon, at the Jazz Showcase, we are going to perform from the original handwritten charts, Freddie's only LP that he did as a leader. It's called Mr. Rhythm. And he did this album in 1955. And I have on loan from his son all the original handwritten charts from that session. And we're going to recreate the entire session at the Jazz Showcase that night.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
That is
great. I have to start practicing.
August 18th, right?
August 18th, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, big thank you. Appreciate you more than you know, and look forward to crafting another session where we can dive into all of your knowledge, which I think we have a long ways to go to get to the bottom of, but we'll keep trying.
I've got a lot of other ones that are, like specific subjects. So if you want to do another one, just let me know and we'll talk about the subjects that are available. Okay.
Spectacular. Thank you, my friend. Really appreciate you.
You're welcome. See you all.